Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. It's the 8th of September 2025, and welcome to the news you missed. I'm Paul Brooker, and I am joined by Warren Thornton. How are you,
Hello.
Warren?
I am absolutely fine, thank you, Paul. You're looking splendid as always. And hello to everybody who watches the show.
Excellent. Now, Warren, what is your first story? Because the weekend's been an interesting one, hasn't it?
It certainly has. My first story is one that's not being covered by anybody, and I think it's very important that we do. We have actually found out the list of the people who have been invited to the Bilderberg Group meeting. Now, this is always fairly clandestine, and of course, it was held on a boat this year. As you can see, here's Wes Streeting, the deputy or the health minister, who I would turn around and say is being groomed for the top job, as well as David Lammy attended last year. Just to give you some of the people who've actually turned up to this year's Bilderberg Summit. Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary of the Labour Party of Great Britain, Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, Peter Thiel and Alex Karp of Palantir, Michael O'Leary, the CEO of Ryanair, Jeremy Hunt, the former UK Health Secretary, John Micklethwaite of Bloomberg, MI6's own Richard Moore, the Swedish Prime Minister or Premier Ulf Kristersson, I should say, Finland President Alexander Stubb, the US Indo-Pacific Command Admiral Samuel Paparo, NATO Chief Mark Rutte and his predecessor Jens Stoltenberg, and Brian Schimpf, the co-founder and CEO of Andrilu Industries, which makes drones.
Well, that is definitely a whole host of the likely suspects right there, Warren. And I think we all know the Bilderberg Group is one of those shady organisations that aren't quite firing down a straight sight. And my first story is Biden's in a little bit of trouble. Internal emails reveal chaos in the final weeks of the President Biden's term. Over his clemency process, senior officials questioned how thousands of pardons and commutations were granted, many using an auto pen signature rather than Biden signing personally. Critics, including Justice Department staff, said they weren't properly consulted and warned some recipients had violent criminal records. Biden granted more clemencies than any president in history, and the process is now under investigation by the Republican led House Oversight Committee. Warren, this is an interesting one because he was giving out pardons to people who hadn't even been guilty of anything.
Yes, they haven't even been tried, and we find you pardoned. I'm reminded of a wonderful scene in all the President's Men when Bob Woodward. This is obviously the Nixon Watergate story. When Bob Woodward turned around and said, "I asked what Hunt's duties." I basically they turned around and said, "I'm sure that the president had no knowledge whatsoever of any deplorable incidents at Watergate, the Democratic National Congress that was bugged." Literally, the editor of the paper says, "Well, isn't that what you expected him to say?" He said, "I never asked about Watergate. I just asked what his duties were. He volunteered the information when I never even asked." And this is the same thing.
Yeah, 100%. And what's your next story?
My next story is about the terrible goings on in the UK. They must think we are absolutely stupid. Of course, we're talking about the cabinet reshuffle in the UK Parliament, which is quite disgraceful. Now, the Starmer government has undergone major shake-ups after weeks of speculation around Deputy PM Angela Rayner. Rayner has now resigned after being found to have lied to the House and also lied about paying her tax. And that led to a reshuffling of 9 ministers so far. Now, those who have resigned from all positions are Deputy PM Angela Rayner, Leader of the House of Commons Lucy Powell, and Scotland Secretary of State Ian Murray. Now, those who have moved to new positions, David Lammy, the former Foreign Secretary, who was an absolute nightmare, is now the Deputy PM and the highest government position ever held by an African in British history. And while Starmer's away playing war in Ukraine, he'll have to do Prime Minister's question times, which literally is going to be a source of fun for us for the next God knows how long. Yvette Cooper, who couldn't stop the boats as Home Secretary, is now the Foreign Secretary. So she's going to be going abroad trying to stop Putin and Xi. And Shavana Mahmood, the former Justice Secretary, who created the two-tier systems of more punishment for white people for doing exactly the same crime, is now the Home Secretary in charge of immigration. You couldn't make it up. Steve Reed is now the Housing Secretary. Peter Kyle is now the Business Secretary. And Pat McFadden is now in charge of the Department for Work and Pensions and part of the Department of Education. It is an absolute disaster. They haven't read the room. We now have a Muslim in charge of immigration in the UK.
What could possibly go wrong, Warren? What could possibly? But all I can say is the corruption in that Labour government is phenomenal. And something I heard over the weekend, and I have to say allegedly, is that Rayner increased the value of her house so she could use her son's trust fund or something. I
That's
mean,
correct.
uh, the corruption is phenomenal. And when you look back at what she was saying, she was
Yes.
totally against corruption and everything else. But she's exactly what she said she didn't want to be.
It's one of those, Paul. People who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, and she was living, shall we say, in a greenhouse.
Well, I don't know, Warren, but let's just say exposure is here. It's showing us everything that's going on. And my next story, a California woman has been charged with registering, guess what? Her dog to vote and casting ballots in its name in two elections, prosecutors say. Laura Lee Urex reportedly submitted a mail in ballot for her dog, Maya Jean Urex, in the 2021 gubernatorial recall, which was counted and attempted the same in 2022. She now faces 5 felony charges, carrying up to 6 years in prison. Urex had previously posted photos of her dog with I voted stickers on social media. The case comes amid ongoing debate over mail in voting, which President Trump has criticised and plans to restrict ahead of 2026 midterms. Warren, I'm sorry, but how can you have a voting system where you can register your dog to vote and it gets counted?
It's quite crazy, isn't it? This is like this almost reminds me of the Harry Redknapp story when he was running for manager of England, and of course he was avoiding tax when they turned around and it turned out his dog had a bank account. It was I mean it is one of those where you sort of look at it and you go, how obvious is this? I mean it's a crazy story. But then again, sometimes fact is far stranger than fiction.
Yes.
Talking of fact being stranger than fiction, who would have thought of this? Now, we have to, it's sort of two stories in one, really, but we'll get on to the second story in my next story. But this is how a top secret SEAL Team 6 mission fell apart in North Korea in 2019. Now, the operation they're saying that it was greenlit by President Trump. But this is the Pentagon saying this. Do bear that in mind. And of course, the Pentagon is loyal to the State Department. And there is no doubt that Rubio's fingerprints are all over this, the release of this. President Trump is turning around and saying that he knew nothing about it whatsoever. But whatever, it is that this SEAL team, while they were negotiating about, obviously, over the nuclear deal, decided that they were going to go and bug Kim Jong Un. Well, they couldn't get into the country. They found it very, very difficult to penetrate the North Korean defences. So they surfaced, and when they surfaced, they found them opposite three fishermen. They then killed those fishermen and called off the mission and disappeared. So what we're talking here is while President Trump was talking to Kim Jong Un, while they were actually going on the nuclear negotiations, they actually carried this out. Now this shows that I don't think Trump was behind this for the simple fact that they tried to do exactly the same thing in Iran, and that failed, and that was in 2013. And Donald Trump was nowhere near the seat of power. They tried to do this, as I say, in Iran 2011, 12, and 13. They carried out operations inside Iran and got caught.
Wow, Warren. I mean, We know there have been organisations that have been working independently of presidents, of governments, and we're seeing some massive exposure now because this story, well, it was probably only restricted to about 12 people. The fact
Yeah,
that we've been able to get hold of this shows me that they are exposing the corruption across the world. And dare I say it, in Trump's own former administration. You can see
yeah.
now that the tide is turning. It really is. Now, my next story, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has unveiled a bold plan to revive the economy, launching a major projects office to fast track construction of port highways, mines, and potentially a new oil pipeline. Carney says Canada has become an energy superpower, exporting liquefied natural gas to Europe. The move aims to reduce reliance on US trade, which has been hit by tariffs. Critics, including Greenpeace and Indigenous leaders, warn the plan risks harming the environment, but Carney insists urgent action is needed to protect jobs and grow the economy. Warren, does this sound like he's laid his hands on some cheap gas from somewhere?
It seems that way, doesn't it? Oh, look, here's a gas deposit we never knew we had. Suddenly, quickly, can you take that turbine off that tanker, please? There's no question whatsoever. It's going to be delivered. Apparently, it's by Delhi Deliveries, and it's called turbine tankers that are going to be going to be dropping it off. That's the sort of thing that's going around on social media, and of course, it's fooling nobody in any country ever. Quite staggering. Something else that is also staggering as well. This once again, this is why I am saying, and I'm saying it here out loud, the big part out loud. Marco Rubio and the Secretary of State, the U.S. Secretary of State, need literally completely obliterating, taking out by Donald Trump. Rubio is the most dangerous man on the planet, and he is after that job. He's the one we are reliably informed who leaked the SEAL Team 6 story and then, along with the Pentagon, tried to pin it on Donald Trump by saying that he knew about it. Now, American geologists looking for oil in Venezuela. Now, very simply, everybody's saying that, of course, it's to do with drugs and everything else. Literally, Marco Rubio has gone warhawk crazy over this. He's well up for the invasion of Venezuela. It's got a horrible smell of the Bay of Pigs in Cuba, which all went wrong, and it's got a horrible smell of literally, shall we say, Vietnam again. We have to remember that the idea was America would do all sorts of things in Ukraine, and that went horribly wrong. Remember that Venezuela is 1.5 times the size of Ukraine.
Wow. I mean, that is. Oh, what can I say? We do not like drugs. We want drugs dealt with across the world. And, well, I don't know, but it looks like the warmongers are doing what warmongers do, don't they, Warren?
Well, it's the 11th richest country for oil, and it's the ninth richest country for rare minerals. Who knew?
Who knew, Warren? Who knew? Well, my next story. In the UK, the government says it will move illegal migrants out of taxpayer funded hotels and into military barracks. That sounds like a great idea. The shift comes after nationwide protests sparked by a sexual assault case involving a migrant in Epping. Housing asylum seekers in hotels is costing nearly £6 million a day, with record numbers still crossing the channel. Defence Secretary John Healey says migrants will be processed rapidly to determine if they can be deported. Prime Minister Keir Starmer, under heavy criticism, has reshuffled his cabinet to tackle the crisis. Now, I would rather them be in military barracks than sitting in five-star hotels and having a pretty penny on my taxes.
Okay, let me unpack this. For 2.5 years, we've been saying that they would be going into these barracks. They were already being gerrymandered, ready-made. This is nothing new. The whole idea was to have these protests and, of course, get counter-protesters to go along. Therefore, it raises the national level, rather like the Maidan in Ukraine, where we've got to have a death before we can do something. And then suddenly they're going to move them into these barracks. Now, you know, you and I both know, Paul, it's on prime real estate. Also, while they're on those barracks, nobody can get to them. If there is some sort of assault where they go off piste, shall we say, you can't then get any retribution whatsoever. because, of course, they'll just disappear back onto the barracks, back to their safe space, and you will be prevented from getting anywhere near them. You won't be able to protest outside, and the hotels, of course, their amount of money is going to fall through the floor. So, of course, that will hurt the British economy as well. But it's not going to cost any less to literally feed and clothe these guys. Do you think the guys who are running these private firms on military bases are not going to want their whack for using their buildings?
100%, Warren. 100%. You know, uh, but what I find more crazy is that we're taking them at face value when they turn around and say they're a 13-year-old boy, when clearly they've got more facial hair than most bears. And I'm sorry, but they drop their passport in the ocean as they cross over.
Yes.
We When they say process them, it means, look, we've got a bit of a backlog. We just need to wait until we can feed you back into society. I'm sorry, but they're just moving the goalposts around. But putting them on a military base, well, that sounds a lot safer than putting them in a hotel in the middle of a residential area where there's lots of schools and children.
They'll still be able to go out, though, Paul. This is the problem. What they're actually doing is protecting them, not protecting you. It's as simple as that. They will have a place to scurry back to. If you want crazy, I've got some stories that are crazy for you. The Ukraine and the Philippines are about to sign a deal for sea craft drones and airborne drones. In other words, the Philippines are going to be buying these drones and stationing them on various islands and shoals covering the South China Sea. They're going to be buying these from Ukraine, which of course is absolute nonsense. Ukraine haven't got any drones to give away. They can barely keep their own in the air. So where are these drones coming from? They're coming from the American military industrial complex. Paul Brooker.
Wow, that story is a weird one, isn't it? Because Ukraine can't sell anything military based because
Now,
they need it all, surely, Warren, don't they? Or is this a
this,
lot of underhanded deals going on?
this is all cloak and dagger to get China ready for Rubio's next sojourn, shall we say, at the end of 2027, when they decide to go to war over Taiwan after the election there. Ukraine selling Philippines drones. Please, do me a favour. They can barely keep their own drones in the sky. They're being knocked out like there's no tomorrow. The idea that Ukraine are actually the ones selling the Philippines drones is ridiculous.
Yeah, I think you're right there. My final story of the day: Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has resigned amid mounting pressure from within his own Liberal Democratic Party. The 68-year-old stepped down after overseeing a string of election defeats, including a major loss in July's upper house vote. As the government struggled with sluggish economic growth and rising consumer prices, Ishiba announced he would start a party leadership vote to choose his successor. Following advice from senior colleagues, despite the setbacks, the LDP and coalition partner Kamito remain in power, relying on a divided opposition to maintain control.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to the Japanese, of course, they are the ones who will be, along with the Philippines and along with Australia, expected to help out. And the Japanese economy, I mean, we're talking about the fourth largest economy in the world here, in terms of what they do in trading and everything else. The Nikkei Dow, all the rest of it are starting to get into trouble. There's no doubt that Japan and South Korea, these are sort of like our Western, Eastern empires, if you like. They're like our Western footholds in the East, along with the Middle East with Israel. But they're certainly looking worse and worse and worse as we go along. Uh,
Yeah.
my last story, of course, is this one, and it is a crazy one because Desi is still free. Desi Freeman, the outbusher or the bushwhacker, whatever you want to call him. Victoria Police are announcing a 1 million reward for information for fugitive Desi Freeman, who is a well-known prepper and obviously bushman. Now, Victoria Police were turning around and saying they were going to apprehend him and everything else. We said it wouldn't be that easy if he was a proper bushman and prepper, and so it is proving. They're offering a 1 million reward. Everybody is turning their nose up at it and saying there is literally "Come here, Desi, I'm not a grass." Is the poster that's going out there. So everybody is offering this guy help. Now, the reason they're offering this guy help is they went to his property to do all sorts of crazy things, the usual made up nonsense. But they've refused, absolutely refused, point blank, and put a D notice on releasing the body cam footage from the police officers that turned up at the property. Now, if there's nothing to see here, Paul Brooker, why can't we see the body cam footage? As awful as it may be, but if there's nothing to see here and the police are not in the wrong, release the body cam footage. Whatever the circumstances may be, he is still at large, despite night vision, despite special SEAL team, the Australian version of SEAL teams, helicopters with night vision goggles and everything. They're still unable to find him, which points to two things. He's either taken his own life and is in a, buried in a rock underneath some rubble or in a mine shaft somewhere, or he is still at large and people are helping him. Either way, he is known to be able to survive for months on his own out in the bush.
Yeah. The body cam footage not being released is just sending off alarm bells. And I get it because obviously it's going to be distressing for the family of the police officer who died. But
Yeah,
likewise, the truth needs to come out. We need to understand the circumstances that made him take a life.
yes.
Because I'm sorry, but isn't it convenient when they want the video out, it's out almost instantly. But when they
Yes.
don't, it'll take months and years. And when all the hype dies down, that's when the truth finally comes out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the perfect example of this is George Floyd and Derek Chauvin. Of course, they only showed a portion of the footage, and then when he was taken to court, they then suppressed that evidence so that it couldn't be shown in court, which is disgraceful. The full video was then shown, and of course, everybody went, "Whoa, hang on a minute! This is a totally different narrative now." And this, I believe, we're getting exactly the same thing. They won't release but why won't they release the body cam footage? A very, very simple reason. The body cam footage must be so bad that they won't even release a portion of it.
Exactly, Warren. Exactly. Well, that was the news you missed on the 8th of September 2025. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you all over on charlieward.com, where you can join the Insiders Club and we can ask some very tough questions and get the answers we want to know to all our guests that appear on there. And the wonderful Warren Thornton, thanks for joining me this morning. Where can everybody find you?
You can find us with a 2 hour show Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., and on a Sunday night, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. At warrenthornton.com or over on Patreon at The Real Truth 502.
Fantastic. Take care, everybody. God bless, and see you all soon. Bye now.
Bye bye.